This is Emerald Mini, a version of Pokemon Emerald created by King Crady that shrinks down all of Hoenn until it's as small as humanly possible. I've long wanted to do a Nuzlocke of Emerald Mini, but since most of the changes are aesthetic, I figured that a standard hardcore Nuzlocke would simply be too easy, and even worse, too boring. So what's the most logical restriction to add to a Nuzlocke of a game where everything is super small? That's right, reduced level caps and matching party size. That's what everyone else was thinking, right? Now, these simple limitations might seem like nothing more than minor inconveniences, but little did I know that by adding these two rules to a playthrough of this game, I was accidentally creating one of the hardest Nuzlockes I have ever attempted. So, with more rules than the dorm room poster of a guy who definitely didn't understand that movie, I was off on my pocket-sized adventure. And mere steps from my new home in Littleroot, I run into Professor Birch and his timeless assailant. With the help of Kip the Mudkip, I send the Zigzagoon packing and make my way north of the adorably pint-sized Oldale town, where I discover that my rival May has been killed and replaced by Wally. Surely this is the only change we'll see in Emerald Mini, and it's completely safe, nay smart, to assume that the rest of this playthrough will be exactly like playing vanilla Emerald, right? As I catch my next encounter, Pooch the Poochiana, it's worth noting that Emerald Mini appears to have done away with the concept of numbered routes, instead making the general areas around each town a single location. What this means is that throughout the playthrough, there are going to be fewer distinct locations to get potential encounters. For example, since catching Mouse the Merrill on the packed route to the left of Oldale, traditionally Route 102, counts as my Petalburg encounter, I can no longer fish in the pond or snag another encounter in the grass patch outside of Mr. Briny's seaside cottage for wayward boys. Regardless, I love how smushed all these towns are. The world design here is fantastic. Petalburg Woods is its own mini location where I snag Bug the Wormpole, who swiftly evolves into a Beautifly. Then from Rusturf Tunnel and Rustboro proper, I get Bun the Whismer and Bathe an Inkata. With a limit of just 3 Pokemon to match Roxanne's party size, I make the short trek over to the very first gym of Emerald Mini. And it's here where I learned that in order to challenge the gym leader, I need to fight every single gym trainer all in a row without healing. Now, in theory, this isn't a big deal since Roxanne's gym trainers all have Geodudes that we can very comfortably take out with Water Gun. The issue is that since I didn't know that I'd have to do this, all 3 of my Pokemon are already at the level cap of 12 to match Roxanne's weakest Pokemon. And if I just take all the KOs with Mouse, I will absolutely overlevel. So what I have to do instead is switch between my Pokemon to better distribute the XP, which opens them up to taking damage that I will have to carry into the fight against Roxanne. But by the time I've taken out all 3 gym trainers and our final battle begins, everyone is still in decent shape, and critically, none of them are over-leveled. Mouse fires off a Water Gun into Roxanne's first Geodude, which depressingly does not get the KO, though the positive is that it does force her to waste a potion, which means that we can set up a defense curl for free before taking the kill on the following turn. With the bump to level 13, our Water Gun does OHKO Roxanne's second Geodude, granting us another level, so now all we gotta do is best the level 15 Nose Pass, and since she immediately goes for a block to prevent switching, this is a cage match to the death. Only one of us leaves the battlefield alive. On the second turn, we move before Nose Pass, revealing a speed tie such that Roxanne should never go for Rock Tomb unless she sees the kill. This means that it's much safer for Mouse to fire off Water Guns as Nose Pass chooses between using Tackle and Harden. Even with Roxanne's healing items, Mouse has got a really good chance here. Suddenly, Mouse's fate is sealed. Roxanne heals with a potion, so even though my little warrior can pop a few more caps, there's nothing I can do as Nosepass rips a Rock Tomb and takes the very first kill of the run. If I had just gotten a single Oranberry, we would have been fine. But it seems that all of Hoenn's overworld berries were lost in the shrinking process, and as a result, Kip, Bay, and I are forced to celebrate our victory over Roxanne without the comforting presence of Mouse. May he rest in peace. The good news is that now I do know about the gym gauntlets and I can be better prepared. While leaving Rustboro, I run into Wally, and out of morbid curiosity, I agree to a fight, which ends up being a huge waste of time, but eventually I make my way back to Mr. Briny's seaside cottage for wayward boys and hitch a ride to Dewford Town. Frankly, I think we could have made this route much smaller for comedic effect, but regardless, Dewford Town is unsurprisingly adorable. After delivering Mr. Stone's letter to Steven and catching Bat the Zubat, I hitch another ride from B-Dog, this time to the bustling city of Slateport, where I beeline to catch Glup the Gulpin. Back in Dewford, I once again have a 3 Pokemon limit against Brawly. By keeping Bug well below the level cap, he's free to gust his way through all the gym trainers, taking only minor damage in the process. I had no idea how many trainers I'd have to face here, so as the battle against Brawly begins, I am just shy of the level cap of 16. Fortunately, Bug is a really good counter to our foes' fighting types. Against Machop, we just need to spam Gust until he goes down. Against Metatite, whose only attacking move is Focus Punch, we can use Absorb to get back to full HP, and then against Makuhita, it's back to spamming Gust, sated by Poison Gas support from Glup. It gets a hair closer than I would have liked, but by dodging a critical hit reversal, we win the second gym badge completely deathless. After visiting the tiny museum and roundly defeating Wally for a 3rd time north of Slateport City, we arrive in the micro-sized version of Mauville City. Other than catching Odd the Oddish in Verdanturf, there's nothing to do before facing off against Wattson, who thanks to Kip should be no problem whatsoever. Even the gym trainer should be fairly Okay, well, I wasn't expecting double battles here, and that's pretty unfortunate, because it means that my Pokemon are getting a lot more XP than I thought. We also take a lot of damage in the process of defeating even the very first gym trainer, but the good news is that for this gauntlet, we do seem to get automatically healed between each fight. So even though it takes some very careful XP management, we successfully make it through to the fight against Wattson, where Kip can So I guess this is a double battle too. I can honestly say that I wasn't expecting that at all. But sometimes something unexpected can be a lot of fun, like the end of Zach Krieger's Weapons, Garchomp FJ's Shotgun Wedding, or the collaboration between Digimon and the sponsor of this video, Crystal of Atlan. Crystal of Atlan is a brand new cross-platform Magic Punk MMO action RPG where players become members of the Thornbird Adventurers Guild and uncover the mysteries of the energy crystals that power the floating world of Atlan. Freely choose from 17 classes and characters, engage in exhilarating combat featuring fluid combos and aerial movements, and even take your skills into competitive PvP matches against your friends or enemies. And from now until September 17th, you can enjoy the Digimon Adventure Crystal of Atlan collaboration event, featuring some of the franchise's most iconic Digimon. Gatomon and Agumon have left Kari and Tai in the dust and are now here to help you in battle, even digivolving into Anguamon and War Greymon. Garurumon and Metal Garurumon are custom mounts that you can ride throughout Atlan, and there's even a brand new boss, the Vicious Machinedramon. As a big fan of the Digimon anime, this collaboration is awesome to see. So if you're like me, you'll absolutely want to use my link in the description down below to check out the Digimon Adventure Crystal of Atlan collaboration available right now and free to download on iOS, Google Play, and PC. Thanks so much to Crystal of Atlan for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to this unexpectedly difficult challenge. A surprise double battle against Wattson certainly makes this harder than I was expecting, but as long as Kip locks in, we should be fine. I start by switching Pooch into Bun, as Electrike and Voltorb both hit Kip for minor damage. Our Mudshot then barely misses out on the KO against Voltorb, which means that after Electrike uses Howl, the Sphere can do another tick of damage with a second rollout before we get the kill. As Magneton takes their place, Bun nails them with a soft pound before we switch back to Pooch. Magneton then hits a Supersonic into Kip, Electrike goes for another Howl, and then Kip hits himself in confusion. That is not locking in, Kip. I switch him out into Glup, Magneton rips a Sonic Boom, Pooch hits a Sand Attack, and Electrike keeps howling away. So on the next turn, I bring Kip back in for free on a Whiff Supersonic. Then a Sonic Boom still manages to connect into Pooch before she hits Electrike with a Bite. He goes for Howl number 5, and our Mud Shot cleanly takes out Magneton. But now Watson's scariest Pokemon takes the field, only to set up a Howl and then immediately go down to a combination of Bite and a critical hit Mud Shot. Definitely lucked out there. By switching Pooch into Bun, tanking a quick attack, and firing off one last Mud Shot, the third gym badge is ours, and we've once again got it without any deaths. With that, we get to explore the miniature northern expansion of Hoenn, which, thanks to a few new location tags, comes with a fair share of new encounters, many of which will be critical in the fight against Flannery. Though first, we need to thwart Team Magma at the top of Mount Chimney, another location that I do think could have been shrunken down a skosh more than it has. Like imagine the visuals of Maxie wanting to blow up a single square of lava. That'd be comedy gold. Without berries and a fairly low level cap of 24, this fight is tricky. My only resistance to his Mightyana's Dark-type attacks is the Mirror Match, and that's not a particularly reliable answer given that Maxie has healing items and likes to use Sand Attack. So my first plan is to give the Crime Lord a taste of his own medicine via smokescreens from Turt, but an immediate flinch means that we can only get off a single smokescreen before Turt is dead to a critical hit. I decide to risk it, and though Turt does live, she also gets flinched again. Horrendous debut there, Chief. This forces me to switch to Plan B. We trade off Sand Attacks, and thankfully Maxie's misses, but from there, we suffer what can only be described as pretty piss-poor luck. Flinches from Bite and significantly less misses than is statistically likely, topped off with a high roll Bite that kills Pooch before she's done little more than put a dent into her doppelganger. Yet another disastrous showing. Or rather, Maxie's Mightyana is having the performance of a lifetime. I'd like to say that the little chip that Pooch did do before taking a one-way trip to the farm upstate is enough for Bun to come in and take the kill, but with a terrible moveset and Maxie's super potions, I decide that it's best to switch to Lom the Lombre and let her take the KO, because this brings in Zubat, so I send in Sun the Solrock on a wing attack and then take the quick KO with a rock throw. At least that was easy. Camerupt is last, so I immediately bring in Kip on what ends up being a Focus Energy. We can outspeed to fire off a water gun, but with the level disadvantage, it comes nowhere close to getting the one-shot. Thankfully though, Maxie in all his wisdom opts for Tackle instead of Magnitude, which definitely would have killed us with a high enough roll. Instead, victory is ours on the following turn, though it did come at the cost of Sweet Pooch's life. As I scale down the rugged path, I pick up Cow the Numel, who serves as an excellent last-minute addition to the 4-man roster that'll take down the Lava Ridge Gym Challenge. Since the fights against Flannery's gym trainers are just standard single battles, we don't get healed between them, though fortunately most of them are taken down in one shot by Kip. The only issue is Cool Trainer Gerald's Kecleon, who I was hoping to take out with a combination of Ember and Magnitude from Cow, but unfortunately we come up just short, letting our foe heal with a full restore. The result is that by the time we get the kill, Cow is already at just 7 HP, and in order to deal with Gerald's other two Pokemon, we do need to switch into Sun, who takes just a tiny bit of chip. So once again, we've got a major disadvantage as the fight against Flannery begins. Her lead Numel actually survives a water gun from Kip, which means she gets off a Magnitude 6. Though, like against Roxanne, missing out on the KO here does mean that our foe will have one less healing item to use on her ace. At level 25, our Mud Shot is enough to one-shot Slugma, and though a water gun certainly doesn't kill Camerupt, even after she sets up a sunny day, a second one does. Unfortunately, that means that Flannery's scary Torkoal comes in with 3 turns of sunlight left. I decide to switch to Turt on an overheat, but even with the resistance, it's nearly a one-shot, and thanks to the held White Herb, there's little I can do to reduce her damage output. I switch to Sun on a Body Slam, which gets a brutal paralysis because it means that Torkoal can now outspeed and rip a second overheat that instantly kills my only Body Slam resistance. You know, I thought this game was just gonna be a breezy, nostalgic adventure through a pin-sized version of Hoenn, but these gym fights have got me, like, thinking and stuff. This is hard. Well, at this point, I only see a single out. One chance to avoid a full-blown wipe. And it starts by bringing in Cow. If he can rip a high-powered Magnitude, then maybe, just maybe, we have a chance. I bring in Kip and now just start firing off mud shots, but Torkoal immediately hits us with an attract, so I have no choice but to switch to Turt to shake it off. Rest in pieces, Turt. You were aggressively disappointing, but I never wanted you to die. With Kip back in, I rip another mud shot to bring Torkoal into the yellow, and then for once, a body slam doesn't get the paralysis. Wait a minute, if Mudshot can kill from this range, we win. Of course, if it doesn't, Flannery will heal and Kip will be dead. So all I can do is hope that one last Mudshot is enough. And it is! With Kip as the sole survivor, I've miraculously won the 4th gym badge, and this cursed run through Emerald Mini remains alive. Of course, it may not for much longer, because next up is the fight against my father Norman. And without a Pokemon that learns Protect via level up, thanks for that, Flannery, his slacking can shred my team to pieces. Not to mention all of his other Pokemon and the 3 mandatory gym trainers. Since I don't have a fighting type, this is all looking exceptionally difficult, though I can pick up a few more encounters that might help me out. In Lava Ridge Town, I snag the Wynot egg that I make sure to hatch on Trainer Hill so that he's an eligible encounter. Then from the desert, I catch Sand the Sandshrew before heading back to Petalburg City. And along the way, I do make a few interesting discoveries. The first is a funky tree in Verdanturf that ends up being a Sudowoodo. Unfortunately, Odd the Oddish was my Verdanturf encounter, so I can't catch him, but this is a nifty addition to the game nonetheless. The other discovery is Altering Cave just northwest of Slateport City. There, I managed to snag Shuck the Shuckle, whose lackluster Gen 3 learn set means that she'll probably be spending her days in the box. But again, getting access to Altering Cave is nifty. The 4 Pokemon I decide to bring to the Petalburg Gym Challenge are Sand the Sandshrew, Bay the Ninjask, Glup the Swalot, and Y the Wobbuffet, with the idea that Sand can handle most of the gym trainers and let the rest of the team take care of Norman. This proves to be a mistake. Even with Silk Scarf boosted strength, Sand is far too weak to pick up big 1 or even 2-hit kills on most of the gym trainer's Pokemon, so by the time we get to Cool Trainer Burke and his Vigoroth, I need to bring in Y and take the kill with a counter. Which means that I've got one Pokemon at half health and another basically at death's door as the fight against Norman begins. Fortunately, if everything goes well, we can still do this. Against Spinda, Sand simply goes for a Sand attack before falling to a Fachade. I'm not even gonna pretend to feel anything about that one, she was quite bad. This means I can bring in Glup for free, and after a Teeter Dance, nail Spinda with a Yawn. On the following turn, I decide to switch to Bay, though frustratingly Spinda goes for another Teeter Dance, meaning that I need to switch back to Glup and try again. The idea is to get Bay in for free so that he can set up with Swords Dance. On the second try, we do come in for free, but then Spinda gets a 1-turn wake up to hit another Teeter Dance. So third time's the charm, right? I switch to Y, hit Spinda with a charm, prior pun unintended, and then thanks to good confusion luck, lock the bear into Teeter Dance via Encore. This lets me safely switch to Glup, go for a Yawn, switch back to Y as Spinda falls asleep, and then finally bring in Bay, who can now set up a Swords Dance as Spinda mercifully snoozes for a second turn. At +2 attack, Bay is strong enough to take the clean KO against the bear and bring in Vigoroth. Now I do need one more Swords Dance to ensure the KO against him and Lunatone, which requires dodging a critical hit that King Bay thankfully does. So now returns one-shot Vigoroth and Linoone as expected. Against slacking, Bay can use Dig to avoid damage every other turn, thereby rendering the ape completely useless and guaranteeing us the victory just a few turns later. With access to Surf, I can pick up some useful TMs, as well as Orb the Voltorb from New Mauville, before making my way to the eastern part of Chibi Hoenn. There, Steven grants me a gift Beldum who I name Bell. By swiftly evolving into Metang, Bell grants me an extremely useful Steel type, right in time for the fight against Winona, the Flying-type gym leader of Fortree City. Before that, though, there is a fight against Wally. His first 3 Pokemon are all literally washed away by rain-boosted Surfs from Lom the Lombre, but his level 31 Gardevoir with Calm Mind and 90 base power Psychic? Yeah, that's a bit of a problem without a Dark type, especially with the cripplingly low level cap of 29. I start with the switch to Bell, who can at least quad resist Psychic and do mediocre damage via Strength, but after 3 Calm Minds, Gardevoir rips a Psychic that does nearly 50% and then survives our 3rd Strength in the red. So not wanting to risk a high roll, I switch to Y, only for Gardevoir to use Double Team. Hoping that he uses it again, I try to go for an Encore, but since Gardevoir switches to Psychic and our Encore misses anyways, I decide to just switch to Bun for a noble sacrifice. RIP buddy, but this is a Flag on HG Nuzlocke and you are a Loudred, so there was no shot that you were gonna live to the end of this video. With that sacrifice though, I can bring in Bay, who's fast enough to miss a return and instantly die to a Psychic. F***ing Double Team, man. Now I gotta switch to Lom. She can go for a priority fake out, which connects, but fails to get the KO, meaning that I need to again switch to Y, who of course dies, letting Lom immediately swap back in with a refreshed fake out. As long as this hits, we win. But if it doesn't, well, thankfully, we don't need to worry about it. Lom clutches up to win us the battle, though this outcome is nothing short of a disaster. With a whopping 9 deaths, I decide to backtrack to Dewford Town and catch Win the Wingull. Hopefully, she'll live up to that name and be critical to dealing with some of Winona's biggest threats. I also try to catch an Absol to the east of Fortree, but evidently Emerald Mini has a glitch where Absol simply cannot be caught. It's the only explanation. I am Dr. One Ball HG after all. So in order to avoid getting killed by a +6 Razor Wind, I have to call it quits. You know what they say, a purple blob in the hand is worth a furry horse in the bush. Unlike the previous 5 gym challenges, the Fortree City Gym Challenge consists of 2 rounds with a break in the middle. And no, there was no way to know about that break until after I started the first round. Now, this initial set of trainers is actually pretty easy. Orb does good work into most of them, and Win handles a few of the bulkier ones. Unfortunately, in order to ensure that neither Orb nor Win overleveled, I gave Bell an XP share, and as a result, they did overlevel. And even with the XP split, Orb is almost overleveled themselves, so I basically won't be able to use them at all against the second round of trainers. Had I known about the 2 rounds, I definitely would have done this much differently. As we gear up for the next set of presumably 3 trainers, I've replaced Bell with a new XP sync, Goon the Linoon, who I snagged just south of Fortree City, by the way. My lead is now Win, who I'm hoping can make quick work of most of these Pokemon. She can deal with the weaker ones just fine, but the stronger ones like Swellow and Xatu, they require a full team effort to the point where by the time I'm facing off against Winona, every single one of my Pokemon has taken some not so insignificant damage. In fact, Win is already at well below 50% as she faces off against Swablu. This has easily been the hardest split so far. Once again, we miss out on a kill against the lead, though this is the least punishing as Swablu simply uses a safeguard before burning through one of Winona's Hyper Potions. After her lead goes down, she brings in Tropius, so Win rips a quad effective Ice Beam, though it too is just shy of the kill. Fortunately, I luck out as Tropius attempts a Solar Beam, ensuring that Win is free to snag another KO without taking a lick of damage. Third is Pelipper, so I switch to Orb as Winona attempts an extremely predictable Protect, which means that with just one Thunderbolt, we've sliced through 3/5 of Winona's team like a trifecta of perfectly cooked fish fillets. Fourth, though, is Altaria, so it's time for Shuck to earn her spot on the team. With monstrous defense, she easily shrugs off an Earthquake. As Altaria goes for Dragon Dance on the following turn, we lock her in with Encore before switching back to Win. Our Ice Beam isn't enough for the KO, but a lucky Freeze ensures that even if Altaria's Encore ended early, which it doesn't, we'd be safe to get the kill on the following turn. All that's left is Skarmory, so I switch to Glup on an Aerial Ace, barely tank a follow-up Steel Wing to get off a Yawn, and then switch to Win on an Aerial Ace, ensuring that as Skarmory snoozes, we can fire off a Surf. With one final switch, I bring in Orb as Skarmory wakes up to rip her final Aerial Ace, because with a single Thunderbolt, we get the KO for a somehow deathless victory over Winona. That was ridiculous. With 6 badges and 9 deaths, I've finally made it to the reasonable level cap of 41. So for the first time since maybe the early game, I can relax and coast through all the fights on the way to Moss Deep City. By the time we've made it to the Moss Deep Gym, I've gotten a handful of new encounters. Most critically for this current challenge, a Sharpedo named Shark. He provides our team with a much needed dark type, and along with some assistance from Win, can sweep through all of the double battles against various gym trainers. As with the Mauville Gym, any minor damage we take in these double battles gets healed in between fights, such that we're facing off against Tate and Liza with our 4 teammates at full HP. And boy, are we gonna need every last bit of it. The battle begins by Xatu going for a Calm Mind. A little scary, but Claydol is the more immediate threat, so Shark nails them with a Crunch. We then eat a pretty nasty Earthquake, but Win can follow up with a Surf that tragically falls just shy of the KO. Not a great start, and it's a direct result of me grossly overestimating how much XP I'd get from the gym trainers. A Hyper Potion brings our foe back to full HP, and after Xatu goes for Calm Mind number 2, we luck out as our Crunch causes a special defense drop to ensure that Win's second Surf now gets the KO. This brings in Lunatone, and then, on the following turn, Xatu just rips a Psychic for a tragic KO into poor Win. I gotta bring in Bell as Shark hits Lunatone with a hard Crunch before they set up with a Calm Mind and jump back into the green thanks to a held Citrus Berry. This is getting pretty scary. Xatu goes for Calm Mind number 3, Shark rips another Crunch, Lunatone sets up a light screen, and then Bell thankfully takes the KO with a Metal Claw that also manages to score them an attack boost. Solrock comes in last, so knowing that I'll lose to the Xatu if Shark goes down, I switch him out into Kip. Unfortunately, Tate and Liza read me like a book, using Sunny Day with Xatu to let Solrock rip a 1-turn Solar Beam that cleanly and devastatingly kills my starter in one shot. It's a brutal loss, and it forces me to bring Shark back in as Bell hits a Metal Claw for what appears to be just shy of 50% since Solrock's Citrus Berry doesn't activate. I fear that we're about 2 turns from a full-blown wipe, and things get worse as Xatu hits Bell with a Confuse Ray. Then Shark goes for a Crunch that, despite the light screen, still manages to get the KO. Bell breaks through confusion to hit Xatu with a Metal Claw, getting a second attack boost in the process. Wait, things are finally going our way. Instead of hitting Shark with another Confuse Ray, Xatu now opts for a Psychic, letting us freely hit a Crunch to bring our foe into the red. So all Bell needs to do is hit through confusion. And they do! Xatu falls to a needless critical hit, barely winning us the 7th gym badge, though it very well may have come with the biggest toll yet. Both Kip and Win were essential to previous gym fights, and seeing them go down is nothing short of heartbreaking, especially as we prepare for the hardest challenges of the run. No, not Archie, he's a punk. I'm talking about after we save the world from torrential floods and deadly droughts. Juan's Kingdra is a menace even at a regular level cap without having to do 2 rounds of trainer gauntlets. To win these fights, I was gonna need my best electric and grass types. Or rather, my only electric and grass types, including Odd, the newly evolved Vileplume. And I was also gonna need the TM for Giga Drain. It ain't much in Gen 3, but it is our best bet at solid damage. And then, after getting the Giga Drain TM, I don't know what compelled me, but I decided to do this. Yep, turns out that all of those random little brown patches scattered across Hoenn were Emerald Mini's minimalistic version of berry trees, and I had been missing out on using them for the entire playthrough. So yeah, for those of you who have played this, you can go ahead and edit those comments now. I do know about the berries. This is infuriating. I cannot tell you how many times it would have been nice to have a berry. In most of these fights, my Pokemon aren't holding anything, and something like an Oranberry here or a Cherry Berry there could have easily saved the lives of more than a few of my Pokemon. At the very least, I guess I'll have them for the rest of the game. With Absorbs from Lom and Odd, we can get through all of Juan's gym trainers with all 5 of my Pokemon at full HP. As as the battle for the 8th gym badge begins, it starts to rain, though that also benefits me since it gets Lom back some HP every turn via Rain Dish. Also, I have no idea what's going on with the footage here, it just recorded like that for some reason. Anyways, the first major issue with this fight is that we've only got 5 Giga Drains for the entire battle. And right off the bat, we burn 1 to get the KO on Love Disc. Since Whiscash comes in second, we use another one to get another clean kill. Celio is third, and he's bulky enough to survive a single hit, so it takes 2 more to bring Juan down to his final 2 Pokemon. The penultimate one is his ace, and with a moveset of Double Team, Rest, Ice Beam, and Water Pulse, this thing is brutal unless you can one-shot it, which I can't. So instead, my plan is to stall him with a handful of bulky water types, and that goes perfectly fine. Nelson, even as a Celio, takes nothing from Ice Beam, and Lom takes nothing from Water Pulse, especially with the help of Rain Dish. The issue is what happens after we stall him out and Kingdra is forced into using Struggle. See, in Gen 4 and beyond, the recoil from Struggle will deal 25% of a user's total health. But in Gen 3, the recoil is 20% of the damage dealt, meaning that Kingdra takes, by definition, significantly less damage than he dishes out. And with the 6 double teams set up, it's very difficult to supplement that damage with attacks of our own. Then when you factor in the fact that Juan still has 2 hyper potions, things start to look very bleak very quickly. We simply do not have enough HP to survive Kingdra struggling himself to death. I screwed up by not having a perfectly accurate move, or a way to set up Hail, or something. And the consequence is that both Orb and Nelson fall before we can take him out. Though in my defense, I only lost Nelson because Kingdra landed 2 critical hit struggles in a row to bypass stalling via Rest. Yeah, fun fact, Struggle can crit. Twice in a row, even. Well, Lom survives the last few hits of Struggle needed for Kingdra to finally fall, including another critical hit struggle that leaves her with 1 freaking hit point. And since Juan's final Pokemon is a terrible Crawdont, I can just switch to Tenta Tentacruel and take the KO with a few rain-boosted Surfs. We just barely dodged a total disaster there, and though it stings to lose 2 more teammates, bringing our death total up to an unfortunate 13, collecting all 8 gym badges does mean that we've earned the right to challenge the Hoenn League. The road to get there has been paved with brutal death after brutal death, yes. But once we're in the Hall of Fame, this'll have all been worth it. A new grass patch in Evergrande City lets me get an unexpected encounter. Sneck the Seviper. Trash. And then as I try to enter Victory Road, I'm immediately stopped by my rival Wally for our final showdown. This time he reveals that he's traveled outside of Hoenn, so presumably we're gonna see some surprises on his team of 6. Wally's lead, however, is still Altaria, so after a fake out from Lom, I switch to Bat and take the bird out with a few hits. But then Wally sends in a Lapra. Fortunately, Lom is a decent enough counter since she can use Giga Drain for solid damage. Lapra does get off a Perish Song at one point though, and a full restore means that we can't get the kill before I need to switch out to Tent as Wally follows suit and brings in Gengar. He outspeeds and immediately puts us to sleep, so I've got to switch to Shark on a Shadow Ball. A Sludge Bomb does scary damage, but without a critical hit or a poison, we can take the clean KO with a Crunch that brings Lapra back in. So once again, I switch to Lom and eventually get the kill with a few Giga Drains. Fourth is Houndoom, who simply rips a light feint attack before Lom gets another KO with a Waterfall. And then 5th is Rhydon, who of course also falls to a single Waterfall, meaning that Wally's final Pokemon is Gardevoir. I decide to just rip Waterfalls as Gardevoir goes for a Future Sight. In Gen 3, Future Sight is typeless, so it can still hit Dark types, meaning that I do need to be a little careful with Shark. But once the Future Sight goes off for minor damage against Lom, it's now safe to bring in our Dark type and take the kill with a few more crunches to win us the battle. Unsurprisingly, it's a short trip through Emerald Mini's Victory Road, though critically, I do still catch Ma the Hariyama as my final encounter. And with Thick Fat, he'll be extremely useful for the fight against Glacia, so despite being our newest teammate, he's joined the squad as we arrive at the Pokemon League. Here's my full final team, all leveled up to the level cap of 49 to match Sydney's ace. I suppose that based on how I normally do level caps for standard playthroughs, I should technically be matching Drake's lowest level Pokemon, which would be his Shelgon at level 51, but for whatever reason, I decided to do it this way instead. Makes it a little harder, I guess. Anyways, this team's got really solid answers to what I perceive to be the Hoenn League's biggest threats. So at this point, it's just a matter of determining whether they can pull through with a pretty significant level disadvantage. So, do we have what it takes to become champions of Pokemon Emerald Mini? Let's find out. Inside a tiny chamber, we meet the first member of the Elite Four, Sydney. With the lowest leveled Pokemon, he's naturally the easiest. Against his lead Mightyena, Shark rips a powerful Surf for an immediate OHKO. This brings in Cacturne, who we can probably one-shot with an Ice Beam, but in the interest of leveling up as many of my Pokemon as possible, who have all been edged to nearly level 50 since the level cap ends at the start of the Elite Four, I decide to bring in Bat, who takes some minor damage from Needle Arm and then gets the KO with a Sludge Bomb. For similar reasons, I swap out against Shiftry, which ends up causing a little bit of chaos thanks to Swagger spam. In fact, with the attack boost, when Shark hits himself in confusion, he loses over half of his HP. Crazy, but this is ultimately fine, since eventually, Bat can come back in and take the kill with an Aerial Ace. This brings in Absol, and though he can set up with Swords Dance, Bell is free to take the kill with 2 Earthquakes, while taking absolutely no damage at all in return thanks to a Rock Slide miss. So last is Crawdaunt, who does a sliver of damage to Odd on the switch, and then falls to a single Petal Dance. Which means that's the first member of the Elite Four defeated, with 2/3 of my team already at level 50. I'm feeling good about our chances. But then... Yep. Turns out that in Emerald Mini, the Elite Four is a gauntlet, which means that I do not get to heal any of my teammates. This just got significantly harder, and critically, having Sharpedo at less than 50% HP is a real issue for this fight against Phoebe. He can still deal with her first Dusclops, since after a Protect, Dark Crunch does massive damage, and then Dusclops goes for a Curse that takes her out. But this does mean that as Banette comes in second, I gotta immediately switch out so that Shark doesn't drop to said Curse on the following turn. Bell comes in on a Thunderbolt that deals a solid chunk of damage before we can outspeed and take the KO with a super effective physical Shadow Ball. Phoebe's Ace Dusclops is next, and she's bulky enough to tank a hit, which means that Bell gets nailed by an Earthquake that lands a critical hit. Not enough for the kill, but that's a lot of damage that I'll now need to carry through the rest of the Pokemon League. At the very least, another Shadow Ball kills Dusclops, as well as Phoebe's second Banette, so all I need to do is bring in Bat to take care of Sableye, and she actually manages to dodge a Shadow Ball on the switch thanks to her held Lax Incense. Sableye then just wastes time with a few double teams, which we can hit through via Aerial Ace, so that's the second member of the Elite Four defeated. And before I have a chance to do anything, the fight against Glacia begins. I'm forced to lead with Shark, so I immediately switch him into Ma, as Celio goes for a Body Slam that graciously doesn't paralyze. As a result, Ma is free to pick up the kill with a combination of Fake Out and Brick Break, using his held Shell Bell to get back some HP with each hit. Glalie number 1 is next, and after an Ice Beam, she too falls to a single Brick Break. We outspeed Celio number 2 for the fast OHKO, and since Glalie number 2 simply sets up Hail, Ma is actually at full HP as Glacia brings in her ace Walrein. She's definitely bulky enough to survive a single hit, so I gotta hope that we can survive at least one Surf. What the fuck, man? That was literally a 33% chance to hit. Now, all I can do is bring in Lom and hope that she can survive a few more turns to take the KO with a couple Giga Drains. Walrein does thankfully miss the second Sheer Cold, and then she switches to Ice Beams, so Lom successfully gets the KO with most of her HP still intact. Which means that we've now just got to deal with one last member of the Elite Four, Drake. Oh my god! Okay, I guess the final fight of the Elite Four is against Jasmine and her Steel types. Definitely wouldn't hate to have a fighting type right about now. She leads with Aggron, which means that at least Shark is able to get a quick KO with Surf. But from here, things get a little messy as Scizor comes in second. I make the switch to Bat on a quick attack and then go for a Fly. As we take to the sky, I'm crushed to see Scizor go for a counter, but as we come down on the following turn, his attack misses, once again thanks to our lax incense. Bat may very well be the luckiest Pokemon alive, and she uses that luck to spam bites in order to avoid damage from counter, resulting in more than her fair share of flinches in the process. But eventually, Scizor wises up and goes for a Metal Claw, which does a solid chunk of damage and grants him an attack boost that, after a flinchless bite, is just enough of a boost to kill Bat and get a second attack boost for good measure. In hindsight, I really should have just switched to Lom, but as a result of flying through this fight completely blind, I was definitely panicking. Bell can come in and kill Scizor with an Earthquake, which brings in Steelix third. This grants a moderately safe switch to Lom on an Earthquake, who can then take the KO with a Surf. Mawile is fourth, and as a result, we simply use 2 more Surfs to get the damageless kill, as Jasmine opts to just set up with Iron Defense. Which means that she's got one last Pokemon left, but I swear to God, if this is a Metagross, I'm gonna freaking lose it. Okay, Magneton is doable. Surf does solid damage as Jasmine plays 2 her outs by hitting us with a Thunder Wave that lets her outspeed on the following turn and rip a nasty Thunderbolt before Lom completely shits the bed with a full paralysis. This means I gotta bring in Odd, though as long as she too doesn't get fully paralyzed, this should still be okay. Mega Drain does enough damage on the first turn that Petal Dance should get the KO on the second. So, after a Thunderbolt, Odd connects with her Petal Dance to win us the final battle of the Elite Four. And thankfully, we do get a break before facing off against the champion. Even with Bat and Ma dead, I'm hopeful that we can still clutch up against Wallace. Lom and Odd will both need to lock in 100%, and it's absolutely going to come right down to the wire, but with a little bit of luck, we can absolutely do this. You know, assuming that the champion is still Wallace. I mean, hell, maybe it's Wally, or Steven, or Bugsy, I don't know. But as we enter the champion's chamber, I breathe a deep sigh of relief. It is Wallace, which is great because I've basically oriented my entire team around dealing with his 6 water types, so... Well, shit. If you've never played the postgame of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Zinnia here is gonna seem like a completely custom character, but rest assured she is technically a legitimate character, albeit one that I would have never guessed to be the surprise champion of Emerald Mini. She leads with an Exploud, and it quickly becomes clear that this unexpected challenge is one I simply cannot beat. Lombre takes massive damage from Hyper Voice, and thanks to Fire Punches, Bell falls to a mere 6 HP before getting the kill on the first of our foe's Pokemon. And from here, Zinnia brings in her Ace Salamence, who can outspeed and kill my entire team. After an entire playthrough of narrowly avoiding wipes to surprise after surprise, Zinnia was just too much to handle. I had lost, and attempt 1 was over. The frustrating part is that if I had known what was in store for me at the Pokemon League, I absolutely could have won. The surprise gauntlet and the change-up in the last 2 trainers would have drastically affected how I built my team and how I handled that first fight against Sydney. Plus, even with those surprises, I essentially came 1 sheer cold away from winning the entire run. Had Glacia's Walrein missed, Ma would have lived and been a solid answer against Jasmine's Scizor, such that Bat would have likely lived as well. And with a full team of 6, Zinnia would have been significantly easier. Ma can one-shot Exploud, and since Bat is faster than Salamence, we can use Fly to mostly avoid damage and eventually take the KO. That would bring in Ampharos third, who goes down to the team-up of Odd and Bell. Tyranitar would be 4th, and though Lombre wouldn't be able to get the KO, she would be able to do enough damage for Shark to come in and take the kill with a Surf. Against Gyarados, a sacrificial switch to Bat on a Hyper Beam lets Bell come in and start ripping Shadow Balls, ultimately only needing to tank a single Hydro Pump before getting the penultimate kill. Zinnia's last Pokemon then would be Altaria, and with a glorious explosion, Bell could take the final kill to win us not just the battle, but the entire run. Unfortunately, it's all shoulda, woulda, coulda. A false reality, a vision of a future that will never come to pass. I came so painfully close, but Emerald Mini got the best of me. Regardless, it was a ton of fun to play, and King Crady did a great job at realizing a very unique premise. I've included a link to King Crady's video covering Emerald Mini that you should absolutely check out if you have any interest in playing the game yourself. As always, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Or don't, I don't know, but stay tuned for more Nuzlocke content, and until then, remember to always, always, always play around the critical hit.